Here is the most dangerous sentence in real estate. This market is different. People said it about Miami in 2022. They said it about Austin in 2021. They said it about Phoenix, about Boise, about Nashville. Every city that is now bleeding inventory and cutting rents had a moment, sometimes a very long moment, where every surface signal said stable, growing, safe. The prices were holding. The vacancy rates looked fine. Agents were still optimistic. And underneath all of that, the data was already building a case for what came next. That is exactly what this video is about. The cities we are about to walk through are not in the news. Nobody is writing headlines about their housing markets collapsing. Locals will tell you things are fine. Realtors will tell you it's a great time to buy. And if you look at the surface, prices holding, sales still happening, no dramatic vacancy signs, you might believe them. But underneath the surface, in the data that most people never look at, inventory trends, price to income ratios, insurance cost trajectories, migration reversals that haven't hit the headline numbers yet, mortgage delinquency rates ticking up from a very low base. The signature of what happened in Austin and Miami and Phoenix is already forming, quietly, without fanfare. The way these things always start, we are not predicting crashes, we are reading signals. And the signals in these 10 cities are saying the same things the signals in the now struggling markets were saying 18 to 24 months before the bottom fell out. If you own in any of these cities, this video is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to pay attention. Subscribe before we start, because attention is the only thing the market cannot take from you. Let's go. This is Entry 10, Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte looks like the answer to every problem the expensive cities created. That is precisely why it deserves a closer look. Charlotte has spent the last 5 years being everyone's favorite recommendation, affordable relative to the Northeast, growing job market anchored by Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and a growing fintech presence. Warm climate. Good infrastructure, younger demographic. When people talk about where the smart money is going in the Southeast, Charlotte comes up in the first 30 seconds. That reputation has driven a significant wave of in-migration, and with it, a significant wave of construction. Here's where the surface story starts to separate from the data story. Charlotte's active home listings are up 38% year over year. Days on market have increased 40%. Homes that were selling in under 2 weeks are now sitting for 4 to 6. Price reductions are appearing on nearly 22% of active listings, up from under 8% 2 years ago. The apartment market is absorbing a wave of new deliveries, and over 7,000 units added in 2024, into a market where rent growth has already gone flat. Mortgage delinquency rates in the metro have ticked up 0.4 percentage points in 12 months. That number sounds small. In a market this size, it represents tens of thousands of households. Charlotte's financial sector anchor, the thing that makes it feel bulletproof, is more vulnerable than the city's reputation suggests. Banking and fintech employment is highly sensitive to interest rate environments and credit market conditions. Both of those are currently unfavorable. When financial services firms pull back on hiring or begin layoffs, Charlotte feels it faster and deeper than a more diversified economy would. The city built its housing premium on the assumption that financial sector employment would keep expanding. That assumption is being tested right now. A Charlotte real estate attorney posted, "I'm seeing more contract fallouts than I have in 5 years. Buyers are getting cold feet at inspection. Sellers are shocked when offers come in below list." The vibe in the market has shifted, but nobody wants to say it out loud yet because Charlotte is supposed to be the success story. That last phrase, Charlotte is supposed to be the success story, is the tell. Markets that are supposed to be something have a harder time acknowledging when the data starts pointing elsewhere. The narrative momentum keeps people optimistic longer than the fundamentals justify. And when the correction finally arrives in a market that was supposed to be different, it arrives with the added weight of broken expectations. Charlotte spent 5 years being the city that everyone pointed to when they wanted to explain why the housing market was rational and the growth was real and the prices made sense. The 38% inventory jump and the 22% price reduction rate are having a quiet conversation with that narrative right now. The narrative is not winning. A Charlotte seller sits at her kitchen table looking at a listing that has been active for 41 days. Her agent suggested a price reduction 2 weeks ago. She said she'd think about it. She's still thinking about it. In the meantime, 4 new listings appeared on her street. She opens Zillow and checks them. She closes the app and calls her agent. Charlotte still fine, or reading the signs. Drop it below. Next city looks even more stable on the surface. The data is even less convinced. 安慰是是森林的story. Entry 9. Raleigh, North Carolina. Raleigh has Research Triangle, great universities, tech jobs, a reputation for being one of the smartest bets in the Southeast. The data is starting to ask some uncomfortable questions. Raleigh earned its reputation legitimately. The Research Triangle, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, is a genuine concentration of intellectual capital, research institutions, and knowledge economy employment. Red Hat, Lenovo, Cisco, a growing biotech cluster. The city has real economic depth, not just a migration story. People came to Raleigh because the jobs were actually there. That is a more durable foundation than most of the markets that have already corrected. And yet, active inventory in the Raleigh metro is up 44% year over year. The median days on market has more than doubled from its 2022 peak. Nearly 25% of listings have seen price reductions in the last quarter, a number that was under 7% at the height of the boom. New apartment deliveries in 2024 totaled over 6,500 units, with another 5,000 in the pipeline for 2025. Home price appreciation has essentially flatlined, from 18% annual gains at the peak to under 2% now and decelerating. The income-to-price ratio in Raleigh has stretched to the point where the median household can afford only 61% of the median-priced home without financial stress. Raleigh's tech employment base, which is its primary defense against a correction, is not immune to the broader tech sector contraction. Remote work normalization means that Raleigh's appeal as a lower-cost alternative to San Francisco and Seattle is diminishing, because the workers who valued that trade-off are now allowed to live wherever they want regardless. The city attracted people who were optimizing their cost of living relative to a Bay Area salary. Some of those people are now back in the Bay Area or in even cheaper markets further afield. A Raleigh developer posted, "We have 340 units delivering in Q2. Our pre-lease rate is 34%. At this point last cycle it was 71%. I'm not panicking, but I am adjusting every assumption I had about this market 12 months ago." A 34% pre-lease rate on 340 units means more than 220 apartments delivering into a market with no tenant lined up. Multiply that developer's situation across the dozens of projects completing in the Raleigh metro this year, and you have a supply shock in slow motion, building toward a vacancy rate problem that will show up in the headline numbers 6 to 9 months after the units deliver empty. Raleigh's entire pitch was, "We have the jobs and the price isn't insane yet." The price caught up to insane. The jobs are still there, but they're not multiplying fast enough to absorb what got built. The Research Triangle has done a lot of brilliant things. Predicting its own apartment oversupply was not one of them. A newly delivered apartment building in North Raleigh has its lobby lights on at 8 p.m. The fitness center is empty. The co-working space has 2 people in it. Of the 340 units, 112 are occupied. The property manager is on the phone with the owner discussing whether to drop asking rents before the next wave of comps arrives. They decide to wait 1 more month. They will have this same conversation next month. Triangle still solid, or supply coming for it? Let the comments fight. Next city has the strongest economy on this list. It's also showing the most interesting warning signals. Entry 8. Indianapolis, Indiana. Indianapolis is the kind of city that never gets included in the boom and bust conversation. That invisibility is about to end. Indianapolis has quietly built one of the more resilient mid-sized city economies in the Midwest. Healthcare anchored by major hospital systems, a growing logistics and distribution sector, life sciences, a convention economy that punches above its weight, home prices that are still genuinely affordable relative to coastal markets, and even relative to Sunbelt cities that overshot. For years, Indy was the city that housing analysts pointed to as a model of sustainable growth, appreciating steadily, not dramatically, without the speculative excess that destroyed other markets. The signals are subtle, but they are there. Active listings in the Indianapolis metro are up 31% year over year. The share of listings with price reductions has climbed from 11% to 19% in 12 months. Average days on market are up 35%. Apartment vacancy in the urban core has climbed above 9% as new construction delivered faster than population growth absorbed it. More significantly, Indianapolis has seen its mortgage delinquency rate tick up 0.6 percentage points, one of the larger increases among mid-sized metros that are not yet considered distressed. Foreclosure filings have increased 18% year over year from a low base. Indianapolis's warning signal is not dramatic, it is cumulative. No single data point is alarming in isolation, but when inventory is up, price reductions are rising, days on market are climbing, delinquencies are ticking up, and vacancy is expanding, all simultaneously, all in a market that was supposed to be immune to the speculative excess that destroyed other cities. The cumulative picture starts to look like the early chapters of a story that has not ended well in other places. A longtime Indianapolis real estate investor posted, "I've been in this market for 22 years. I've never seen this many price reductions on listings at the same time. It's not a crash, it's a hesitation. But hesitations in real estate, if they last long enough, stop being hesitations. The emotional cost of the Indianapolis signal is different from the cities that have already corrected. In Austin or Miami, the pain is present tense. People are underwater now. In Indianapolis, the pain is conditional. It depends on whether the signals resolve or intensify. The homeowners and landlords watching these numbers right now are in the uncomfortable position of not knowing whether they are looking at noise or at the leading edge of something real. That uncertainty is its own form of cost. Indianapolis spent years being the city that wasn't interesting enough to be in the housing bubble conversation. Now it's in the housing bubble conversation. This is not the kind of attention a mid-sized Midwest city was hoping for. The Pacers have had better years. The housing market is hoping this is not a comparable situation. An Indianapolis homeowner pulls up his neighborhood's Zillow listings on a Sunday evening. He counts 7 active listings within 4 blocks of his house. 18 months ago, there were none. He's not planning to sell. He's just watching. He tells himself he's just watching. Indy still standing or watching closely, I'd drop it below. The next city has been called recession-proof for a decade. The data is starting to disagree. Entry 7, Richmond, Virginia. Richmond has government employment, a growing tech presence, and a cost of living that still looks reasonable. It also has warning signals that most people in Richmond have not seen yet. Richmond's appeal is genuine and multi-layered. Proximity to Washington, D.C. without D.C. prices. A state capital with the government employment stability that implies. A growing arts and food scene that has driven genuine urban revitalization in neighborhoods like Scott's Addition and Manchester. Virginia's overall economic health, one of the better managed state budgets in the country, has given Richmond a stability floor that more fragile markets lack. People point to Richmond and say, sensible choice. Inventory in the Richmond metro is up 29% year over year. Days on market increased 38% over the same period. Price reductions are appearing on 21% of active listings, nearly triple the rate from 2 years ago. The apartment market is tightening from a supply perspective, over 4,800 units delivered in 2024, with pre-lease rates running below historical norms. The price-to-income ratio has stretched from a healthy 3.8 in 2019 to 5 on today. Still below the distressed markets on this list, but the direction of travel is consistent and it has been moving in one direction for 4 consecutive years. Richmond's specific vulnerability is its proximity to Washington, D.C. and its dependency on federal adjacent employment. Contractors, consultants, logistics companies, and technology firms that serve the federal government make up a significant portion of Richmond's economic base beyond state government. Any contraction in federal spending, and the current policy environment suggests federal spending contraction is more likely, not less, ripples through Richmond's private sector employment faster than the government employment numbers would suggest. Richmond looks like a government-stable market. It is partly a government-adjacent market, which is a different thing. A Richmond mortgage broker posted, "My purchase application volume is down 28% from this time last year." Rates haven't moved that much. What's moved is buyer confidence. People who were ready to buy 6 months ago are in a wait-and-see mode. I've never seen this many qualified buyers just sitting on the sidelines voluntarily. Qualified buyers sitting voluntarily on the sidelines is one of the most significant demand signals a housing market can produce. It means the market has not lost buyers because of financing constraints. It has lost buyers because the buyers themselves are uncertain about where prices are going. When confidence evaporates from willing and able buyers, the supply-demand equation tilts faster than the headline numbers show. Richmond spent years being the DC alternative that actually made financial sense. The commuter who gets the government salary and pays Richmond prices instead of Arlington prices. That arbitrage is narrowing. The Richmond prices part caught up faster than anyone expected, and now the DC salary part is looking less certain than it did. A Richmond couple who have been pre-approved for a mortgage since January are touring homes for the 4th consecutive weekend. They've seen 22 houses. They've made 0 offers. They tell each other they're waiting for the right house. Their mortgage broker, who calls every 2 weeks, knows they're waiting for the market to tell them something. The market hasn't told them what they need to hear yet. RVA still good or smart to watch? Comments open. Next city is the one that will genuinely surprise you. Entry 6. Columbus, Ohio. Columbus has Ohio State, Intel, and one of the strongest mid-sized city growth stories in the Midwest. It also has a housing market that is quietly running out of runway. Columbus earned its growth story, a major research university that anchors talent and innovation, a diversified economy across healthcare, insurance, retail corporate headquarters, and a significant government presence. And then Intel is a $20 billion chip manufacturing investment announced in 2022 that was supposed to be transformative for the region, generating thousands of direct jobs and tens of thousands of ancillary positions. Columbus's housing market priced in that future aggressively. Active listings in Columbus are up 41% year over year. Price reductions are appearing on 24% of listings, one of the higher rates among the cities on this list. Days on market are up 44%. New apartment deliveries in 2024 totaled nearly 5,500 units, the largest single-year addition in the metro's history. And critically, the Intel project has experienced significant delays and scope reductions. The $20 billion investment that was the cornerstone of Columbus's growth narrative is not arriving on the timeline the housing market priced in. Jobs that were expected in 2025 are now expected in 2027 or later. The demand that was supposed to absorb the supply that was built in anticipation of it has not materialized. Columbus built a housing market around a promise. The Intel announcement was real. The investment is real, but the timing shifted. And housing markets do not price in timing adjustments gracefully. Developers built, landlords bought, sellers priced based on the growth story. And the growth story is technically still true, just delayed by 2 to 3 years. In real estate, 2 to 3 years of delay is not a minor footnote. It is the difference between a market that absorbs supply smoothly and one that accumulates vacancy while waiting for demand that is definitely coming, just not yet. A Columbus developer said in an industry call, "We broke ground on 400 units in 2022 based on the Intel timeline. Those units are delivering now. The Intel workers are not here yet. We are going to be offering significant concessions for at least 18 months and possibly longer. We built for a version of Columbus that is still 18 to 24 months away." For homeowners in Columbus who bought based on the Intel story, the price appreciation, the neighborhood revitalization, the employment anchor in waiting 24 months for the demand to arrive is not abstract. It is 24 months of carrying costs on an asset that is not appreciating as expected in a market where inventory is rising and the buyers who would have competed for your home are not yet employed at the facility that was supposed to bring them here. Columbus priced in the Intel factory before the factory was built. The factory is being built slowly, very slowly. In the meantime, Columbus has 5,500 new apartments and a housing market that is doing the math on what happens when the supply arrives before the demand does. Ohio is used to waiting. Its housing market is less patient. A Columbus landlord bought a rental property in a neighborhood near the Intel development corridor in early 2023. He has a tenant. The tenant's lease is up in 3 months. The tenant has told him they're moving to a newer building that is offering 6 weeks free. He checks the comps. The newer buildings are all offering concessions. He checks his mortgage. He does not have room to offer concessions. He thinks about the Intel timeline. He gets up and makes coffee. Columbus long game or Intel delay hurt. Drop below. Halfway through and the next 5 get progressively harder to rationalize as fine. Entry 5. Salt Lake City, Utah. Salt Lake City has been the Mountain West success story for a decade. The data is writing the first chapter of a different story. Salt Lake City's rise was powered by genuine economic development, a growing tech sector centered on the Silicon Slopes corridor, a young and growing population, outdoor recreation as a talent attraction tool, and a geographic position that made it attractive to companies and workers leaving the Bay Area and Seattle without wanting to go as far as Phoenix or Texas. The city had real things going for it, and the housing market reflected that with appreciation rates that were aggressive but felt defensible. Utah City's following Colorado into a housing crash is not a headline generated by speculation. It is a data observation. Active inventory in the Salt Lake Metro has surged 52% year over year. Price reductions are on 27% of listings. Days on market have nearly tripled from their 2022 low. The median home price to income ratio in Salt Lake City has reached 7.2, among the most stretched in the country for a non-coastal market. Foreclosure activity is rising, mortgage delinquencies are ticking up, and critically, the Silicon Slopes tech employment base is subject to the same sector-wide headwinds affecting tech employment everywhere: slower hiring, consolidation, and remote work normalization pulling workers to cheaper markets. Salt Lake City's specific vulnerability is demographic math colliding with affordability math. The city has a large, young, family-forming population, which is normally a housing market's best friend. But when home prices reach a price-to-income ratio of 7.2, the family-forming demographic that is supposed to be buying first homes cannot qualify for them. The demand that should be natural and durable is being priced out of participation. What replaces it is investor demand and move-up buyers, both of which are discretionary and both of which pull back the moment conditions soften. A Salt Lake City first-time buyer posted, "I make $85,000 a year. I've been saving for 4 years. I can afford a $320,000 home with my down payment. The median home in my target neighborhood is $590,000. I am not buying in Salt Lake City. I don't know where I'm buying, but it is not here. I'm leaving this conversation." That buyer represents the core of what makes Salt Lake's situation particularly fragile. When the natural buyer, the young family with stable income and a down payment, is priced so far out of the market that they are not just delaying but actively leaving the region, the market loses its demand floor. What remains is speculative demand and incumbent owners, neither of whom can sustain prices indefinitely without the entry-level buyer completing the chain. Salt Lake City attracted tech workers from San Francisco because it was affordable relative to San Francisco. It then priced itself to a point where it is no longer affordable relative to a $85,000 annual salary in Utah. The entire arbitrage that drove the growth has consumed itself. Silicon Slopes built a San Francisco problem without the San Francisco salaries to match it. A young couple in Salt Lake City closes a Zillow tab for the 4th time this week. They've been looking for 8 months. They make good money by Utah standards. They cannot make the math work. They open a tab for Boise, then they remember what happened to Boise. They open a tab for Tucson and sit quietly for a moment, considering a life they did not plan for. SLC still worth it or priced out and done? Leave it below. 3 cities left, and each one has a specific mechanism of risk that the surface numbers completely hide. Entry 4. Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis is not a city anyone expected to appear on this list. That is exactly why it is on this list. Memphis has never been a hot market in the traditional sense. Low home prices, modest appreciation, an economy built on logistics, healthcare, and FedEx. Not the kind of profile that generates housing bubble warnings. But the pandemic era did something unexpected to Memphis. It made it visible to investors in a way it had never been before. Cheap single-family homes, solid rental yields, a large renter population, and prices so low that even modest appreciation looked attractive on a percentage basis. Institutional and semi-institutional investors poured into Memphis during 2021 and 2022 at a scale the city's housing market had never experienced. The investor footprint in Memphis is now a liability rather than an asset. Institutional landlords control an estimated 8 to 12% of the single-family rental stock in some Memphis zip codes, far above the national average. As those investors face pressure from rising carrying costs, insurance increases, and portfolio rationalization, they are beginning to exit. Single-family listings in Memphis are up 34% year over year. Price reductions are accelerating. And crucially, the local buyer pool, working class and lower middle class households who are the natural buyers for Memphis homes, has been squeezed by the same inflation and rate environment affecting renters everywhere. The investors who drove prices up are leaving a market whose natural buyers cannot yet absorb what's being listed. When institutional investors exit a market they entered at scale, they do not do it gradually. They make portfolio decisions that dump multiple properties simultaneously. A single institutional landlord exiting a Memphis portfolio might add 200 or 300 listings to a market at once. That is not a gradual supply increase, it is a supply shock. The Memphis market is not yet in that phase, but the conditions for it are assembling quietly. A Memphis property manager who handles units for several out-of-state investors posted, "3 of my clients have told me in the last 60 days they want to exit their Memphis portfolios. 2 of them bought between 20 and 40 units each in 2021. When they sell, that inventory hits a market that doesn't have the buyer depth to absorb it cleanly. I don't know what happens then. I know it isn't nothing." For the long-term Memphis residents and local investors who live through the city's housing market being invaded by outside capital and priced upward, and who now face the prospect of that same capital leaving and potentially crashing prices below where they were before the invasion. The emotional math is complicated. The boom didn't benefit them much. The bust might cost them something they didn't gain. Wall Street discovered Memphis in 2021 and decided the Soul Music City's single-family housing stock was an attractive asset class. Wall Street is now quietly reconsidering that position. Memphis has survived worse things than institutional investors changing their minds. It has survived significantly worse, but the housing market is going to feel this one before it's over. A Memphis neighborhood that had 3 for sale signs 6 months ago now has 11. Most of them are the same institutional property management company. The houses are clean, recently renovated, competitively priced. They've been on the market for 45 days average. The local families who might buy them are watching the listings multiply and deciding to wait to see how low the price goes. The investors are watching the days on market counter and wondering the same thing from the other direction. Memphis local watches or investor exit coming. Comment below, 2 left. Both of them are hiding something significant behind a very convincing surface. Entry 3, Jacksonville, Florida. Jacksonville avoided most of the Florida housing circus. The data suggests it was not immune, it was just slower. While Miami was exploding and Tampa was overheating and Orlando was losing its mind, Jacksonville sat quietly on the northeastern coast and appreciated at a measured pace that looked responsible by comparison. No crypto millionaires, no bachelorette economy. Just steady in-migration from the Northeast, military employment from Naval Station Mayport, a growing financial services sector, and home prices that remained genuinely affordable relative to the rest of Florida for longer than almost anywhere else in the state. The quiet is ending. Active listings in Jacksonville are up 47% year over year, one of the larger increases in the state. Price reductions are appearing on 28% of active listings. Days on market have doubled. New construction, which continued at pace because Jacksonville's land availability made it economical to build, has delivered supply into a market where demand has softened faster than builders adjusted, and Jacksonville faces the same insurance crisis that is metastasizing across Florida. Average homeowner insurance premiums climbing past $5,000 annually in some zip codes, with several insurers having exited the state entirely. The affordability that made Jacksonville the safe Florida option is being systematically eroded by insurance costs that do not respond to market corrections. Jacksonville's insurance problem is the signal that the other data points are confirming. Home prices can correct, inventory can normalize, days on market can shrink when rates move, but insurance costs in Florida are being set by climate risk models, not housing market cycles. They go up regardless of whether the housing market is booming or busting. A homeowner in Jacksonville facing a $5,500 annual insurance bill is dealing with a cost that does not improve when prices fall. It is a structural addition to the cost of ownership that is permanently changing what Jacksonville housing is worth at any given price point. A Jacksonville homeowner posted, "I bought my house in 2020 for $285,000. My insurance was $1,800 a year. My renewal just came in at $4,900. My mortgage payment didn't change. My insurance payment nearly tripled. I am now paying more per month in insurance than I was in 2020 than my entire mortgage payment was. I cannot explain to you how this happened, but I am living it." That homeowner's situation is replicated across hundreds of thousands of Florida properties. The mortgage is fixed, the insurance is not. The property tax assessment follows appreciation. And the maintenance costs on older Florida housing stock are real and rising. Owners who bought at what felt like a reasonable price are discovering that the ongoing cost of ownership was not captured in the purchase price, and it is escalating in ways they cannot control or predict. Jacksonville spent years being the Florida city that didn't make the news. Congratulations, Jacksonville, you're making the news. The 47% inventory increase and the tripling insurance premiums have achieved what decades of relative stability couldn't. They got people paying attention to Jacksonville's housing market. This was not on anyone's 2026 bingo card. A Jacksonville couple opens their homeowner's insurance renewal. They read the number. One of them says, "That can't be right," and the other goes to find last year's bill to compare. It is right. They sit at the kitchen table doing math they did not expect to be doing. The house is paid current, the mortgage is fine, the insurance bill has changed the math on everything else. Jack's still good value, or insurance is the story. I'll drop it below. One entry left. It is the most counterintuitive city on the list. Entry 2, Denver, Colorado. Denver has been the Rocky Mountain success story for 15 years. It is also where the data is most loudly saying, pay attention. Denver earned its reputation through genuine economic development, a diversified base of aerospace, energy, technology, healthcare, and outdoor recreation industry. The city attracted educated professionals, benefited from cannabis tax revenue that actually funded real public services, and maintained a quality of life that justified its price premium for years. When the pandemic hit, Denver was one of the cities that absorbed migration well. Remote workers who wanted mountains and culture and access to outdoor recreation without the cost of the West Coast. The housing market reflected all of this with appreciation that was aggressive but felt earned. Colorado recorded the largest year-over-year surge in foreclosures in the entire country, 145%. Not the largest in the Mountain West, in the country. Foreclosures more than doubled in a market long viewed as resilient. Inventory levels in the Denver metro have climbed above pre-pandemic 2019 highs, meaning the city now has more homes for sale than it did before the boom, at prices that are still significantly higher than they were then. The state swung from a budget surplus to a projected $750 million shortfall in under a year. Active listings in Denver proper are up 39%. Price reductions are on 26% of listings. Days on market are up 41%. And the tech-adjacent employment base that drove Denver's growth is subject to the same sector-wide headwinds affecting every knowledge economy city on the list. Denver's foreclosure surge is the most important data point on this entire list. Here is why. Foreclosures in an economic expansion, when unemployment is reported as low and the economy is technically growing, are a structural warning signal of a different magnitude than foreclosures in a recession. They mean that people are losing their homes not because they lost their jobs, but because the carrying costs of the homes they bought have become structurally unsustainable at the price and rate combination they agreed to. That is a harder problem to solve than unemployment-driven foreclosures, because it doesn't resolve when the economy improves. It resolves when prices fall far enough that the math works again. A Denver real estate analyst said, the 145% foreclosure number is not a data error. It is the market telling you that the prices people paid in 2021 and 2022 at the rates that were available then are not sustainable at current carrying costs. The correction in Denver is not coming. It has started. The headline numbers are just catching up to what the foreclosure data has been saying for 6 months. The homeowners in those foreclosure filings are not abstractions. They are people who bought during the peak, stretched to make the numbers work, refinanced when rates were low, and are now holding a mortgage at a price that was justified by a market that no longer exists at that level. The 145% increase means the number of those situations doubled in a year. It will not stop doubling until prices correct enough to restore sustainability, or until enough supply exits through distressed sales to bring inventory back into balance with demand. Denver spent years being the city that was neither as crazy as California nor as volatile as Texas. It was the sensible middle ground, the Goldilocks market. The 145% foreclosure surge has retired the Goldilocks metaphor. The porridge was apparently hotter than it looked, and a significant number of borrowers are finding that out right now. A Denver homeowner receives a notice from her lender. She has missed 2 payments. She did not miss them because she is unemployed. She is employed full-time with a stable income. She missed them because her income has not kept pace with the property taxes, the HOA increase, the insurance renewal, and the HVAC system that failed in February and needed replacement. She calls the lender, she explains. The lender explains her options. She writes down the numbers. She looks out the window at the mountains she moved here for. She picked Denver because it made sense. She is trying to figure out when it stopped. Denver still holds, or foreclosure number says different. Drop it below. Last entry, and it is the one that ties every city on this list into a single thesis. Entry 1. The signal every stable market is ignoring. Number 1 is not a city, it is the pattern that connects every city on this list, and the reason stable looks different from safe. Every city we covered today has something in common. None of them are in crisis right now. Prices are holding or declining modestly. Sales are still happening. Vacancy rates are elevated but not catastrophic. Landlords are stressed but not defaulting en masse. Homeowners are watching their equity flatten but not watching it disappear overnight. By the standard of what a housing correction looks like in its visible phase, dramatic price drops, surging defaults, mass vacancy, news coverage, none of these cities are there yet. They are in the phase that comes before that, and that phase is where the data speaks most clearly to anyone willing to read it. The leading indicators that preceded every major housing correction in modern American history share a specific sequence. First, inventory rises faster than sales volume. Second, days on market expand. Third, price reductions accelerate on active listings. Fourth, mortgage delinquencies tick up from a low base. Fifth, insurance and carrying costs rise independently of price. Sixth, the natural buyer, the demographic that historically absorbs supply at each price tier, becomes unable or unwilling to participate at current prices. Seventh, investor capital, which entered late in the cycle, begins to exit. Every city on this list is currently showing between 4 and 7 of those 7 signals simultaneously. None of them are showing 0. Most of the cities that are now in visible crisis were showing the same 4 to 7 signals 18 to 24 months before the crisis became undeniable. The twist is that stability is not the same as safety. A market can look stable right up until the moment it isn't, because the leading indicators are not visible in the headline numbers. The median price is a lagging indicator. It reflects what sold last month. It does not reflect the inventory that has been building, the buyers who have stepped back, the insurance costs that are making ownership uneconomical, or the investors who are quietly making exit calls. By the time the median price shows a correction, the correction has usually been underway for 6 to 12 months in the data that precedes it. The cities on this list are in that period. The data is ahead of the headlines, and the question for every owner, every buyer, every renter, and every investor in these markets is not whether the signals are real, they are real, but whether they resolve or intensify from here. A housing economist recently said, "The markets that worry me most are not the ones already in the news. The markets in the news have already priced in the risk. The markets that worry me are the ones that still feel fine, where the agents are still optimistic, where the sellers still expect to get their number, where buyers still assume stability is a permanent condition. Those markets are pricing in an outcome the data does not support." The emotional cost of being in a market that looks stable but is building toward a correction is a specific and underappreciated kind of stress. You cannot point to dramatic evidence. You cannot justify concern to the people around you who are still optimistic. You are reading signals that are real, but not yet legible to the casual observer, and you have to make financial decisions. Buy or wait, sell or hold, renew or renegotiate, under uncertainty that the surface conditions actively obscure. That is the most expensive kind of market to be in, not because the losses are necessarily coming, but because the cost of being wrong in either direction, selling too early or holding too long, is real, and the information you need to make that call correctly is buried in data that most people never look at. The most dangerous phrase in real estate is not "prices only go up." The most dangerous phrase is "this market is stable." But stable is what every market looks like right before the inventory build and the delinquency tick and the insurance increase and the investor exit and the affordability wall all arrive at the same party and decide to stay. The cities on this list have sent out the invitations. The party has not started yet, but the RSVPs are coming in. Somewhere in Charlotte, in Raleigh, in Indianapolis, in Denver. Someone is looking at the same data we just walked through. Maybe they're a homeowner who bought in 2022 and is watching their equity flatten. Maybe they're a renter whose lease is coming up and is wondering whether to sign another year or wait for the leverage to shift further. Maybe they're a landlord who has one vacancy for the first time in 3 years and cannot figure out if it's a blip or the beginning of something. They are all reading the same market. They are getting different signals depending on which numbers they look at. And the difference between the ones who navigate this correctly and the ones who don't is not intelligence or luck. It is the willingness to look at the numbers that do not confirm what they want to believe. None of the cities on this list are guaranteed to crash. That is not what this video is saying. What this video is saying is that the data signature currently present in these markets is the same data signature that preceded the corrections in markets that have already corrected. Pattern recognition is not prophecy, but it is the closest thing to an early warning system that the housing market offers. If you own in any of these cities, understand your actual carrying costs, mortgage, insurance, taxes, maintenance, relative to what your property could sell for today. Know your break even, know your timeline. Do not make decisions based on what your realtor tells you the market is doing. Look at the inventory trend, look at the days on market trend, look at the price reduction rate. Those three numbers together will tell you more about where your market is headed than any professional assessment from someone who earns a commission on a transaction. If you are renting in any of these cities, the leverage may be shifting in your direction. Not as dramatically as in the markets we covered in our rent crash video, the Yaiti, but the direction is the same. Watch the vacancy rates in your building. Watch the concessions being offered to new tenants. If your building is offering move-in deals to new renters and sending you a standard renewal, you have a negotiation available to you that most renters don't realize exists. If you are thinking about buying in any of these cities, the worst time to buy is at the end of a stability phase that is about to transition. The best information you can arm yourself with is the leading indicator data, not the headline price, not the agent's optimism, not the neighborhood's reputation, the data, the inventory, the delinquency trend, the insurance cost trajectory, the employment anchor's actual health. We will keep watching these markets. If the signals resolve, if inventory normalizes, if delinquencies stabilize, if insurance costs plateau, if the natural buyer returns, we will tell you that too. This channel follows the data wherever it goes. Right now, it is going to places that most of the coverage of these markets has not caught up to yet. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me what you are seeing on the ground. Are prices holding in your neighborhood? Are listings multiplying? Is your landlord suddenly more interested in keeping you than they were a year ago? The data tells one version of this story. The people living it tell another. Both of those versions matter here. Subscribe if this gave you something useful. And if you know someone who owns or rents in any of these markets, share this with them. The information is free. The cost of not having it is not.